There's a lot of value in a containerized command application, especially in the fact that we made it so the user need not worry how to install the application or its dependencies. Web applications, or other applications that expose HTTP services, are commonly Dockerized as well. In this lesson, we'll build a Ruby application using the Sinatra web framework and build a Docker image containing it. The web application will store a count of number of page views in Redis and display the number of hits on the page. Since we know that we'll need a running Redis container for our web application, we'll start one now, and we'll name it Redis. Next, let's take a look at our Ruby web application. The first few lines are just Ruby imports. And here, we tell Sinatra to bind to 0000, which will bind to all network interfaces. It's important that we do this in our container, otherwise we won't be able to access our web page outside of the local host. Here, we're instantiating our connection to Redis. And notice that we're simply using the hostname Redis, which is the name of the Redis container that we started. That's because we'll use a Docker link to connect the two containers. Using Docker links allows us to use the container name as the host name when referencing a linked container. This is a much simpler alternative than using the environment variables that we used in the last chapters. Next, we call the function get with the root path. The code inside this block will be executed when we access the root of our application in a browser or with an HTTP GET request. The first thing we do in our function is increment a key named count on the Redis client and store the incremented value in a variable named count. Then, we write an HTML document to the response with the heading Hello O'Reilly and a message telling the user the number of times the page has been visited. Let's write our Docker file now. First, we'll need to pick a base image. There are likely images out there that already include Ruby, but we'll use a base Alpine Linux distribution to install the dependencies ourselves. As before, we can specify the Alpine Linux base image using the from instruction. Next, we'll specify me as the maintainer of the image using the maintainer instruction. After that, we need to install Ruby, and we can install Ruby using the APK package manager that Alpine Linux provides. We also need to update the package sources. So let's update our sources and add the Ruby package in the same commit using the run instruction. Next, we can install the Sinatra Ruby gem for use in our web application. After that, we can install the Redis Ruby gem for use in our application. Then, we can use the add instruction to add our Ruby source code file called counter-rb to the image with the same name. Remember, only files in the Docker context in the same directory or below the Docker file can be added to the image. The next instruction is one of the most important when it comes to building web applications into Docker images. Our Sinatra application will bind to port 4567 inside the container, and we'd like to map that port onto our Docker host so that we can easily access it from the outside. We can expose the port or make it mappable using the expose instruction. Expose simply takes the port to expose as an argument. And finally, we set our entry point to be ruby counter.rb. This ensures that the person or process running our container need not know anything about the internals. They can simply run the image without specifying a command. Let's build our Docker image and tag it with the name rickfast/counter. As you can see, all of the instructions in our Docker file were executed, producing a new image, which was tagged rickfast/counter. We can run this image by using docker run and specifying our new image name. We can map the exposed port 4567 to 4567 on the Docker host using the -p flag. And remember, we want to link to the Redis container this time. In the output, we see that our web application is started up. We can now open it in a browser and test out the functionality. We can see our HTML page telling us that the page has been viewed one time. Let's refresh it a few times, and as we refresh the page, we'll see the counter go up.